sustainable framework that can sustain the longer time and help us produce the effective marketing strategies. Now, they don't have to be necessarily digital only, but however, the digital is dominant in the present day scenario. So we can safely ignore the traditional media if it is irrelevant in our discussion. Uh, so let's begin with the sustainability. For me is something that doesn't only assure the profits or doesn't only assure you to avoid the losses. Sustainability to me also means that you should be able to tap the potential of diverse nature of demands or varying trends of the demands. For example, if there is a sudden peak in the business demand, right? So your marketing activity should be able to cope up with that demand, and you should be able to tap the potential of that sudden surge in the business. Well, that is something we should be able to deliver to. Now, the before a couple of days ago, we were discussing, all these three panelists were discussing offline about the WH family of the digital marketing strategy. So I would like to go to Mr. Shivanand, and if you can help our audience understand what actually we were discussing on that day, the WH family marketing strategy, or WH family questions of the marketing strategy. Please help us understand that in the way you feel more convenient about them.
Definitely. Okay. So I think we should set the stage here for what we are talking about in the next 30, 40 minutes. So as you mentioned, WH strategy is just a framework which we use, which covers the why, what, who, where, when, and how part of it. So in a short, we actually call it as a WH format, but actually it's nothing more than the definition of the channels, definition of the customer, definition of the product, definition of the communication protocols on how we want to reach our.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. You are not audible. Your mic is breaking intermittently. Your mic connection is something. There is wrong with your mic connection.
1 second. I'm able to hear you guys clearly. Just a minute.
This last two statements were very clear enough. We could hear them well.
So, is it better? Is it better?
Yes, it seems to be.
I'll try to change over to. The definition of WH. So W stands for what, who, where, and when, and H stands for how. So it's nothing but a overall bigger framework in terms of understanding why we do things, what are we trying to promote, who is my target audience, where do we want to promote, when do we want to promote, and finally, who do we want to reach the target customer. I think that whole framework is usually defined as a WH framework. It's more a theoretical way of approaching the problem. But I think this puts a good foundation to what we are discussing in the next 30 to 40 minutes. So when we talk about the why part of it, we are trying to understand the goals of the marketing. So when we talk about goals, usually we talk about SMART goals. So it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So when we look at SMART goals, it basically are the techniques that teams can use to create actionable marketing plans, which supports the company's long-term objectives. I think that's the most important thing. And we need to make sure that it aligns with the sales and customer movement. Because selling is just one part of it. Marketing is just one part of it. But I think
Dr. Koteswar, we are not able to hear you that well. I guess there's some internet issue or something. I guess even Amit wanted to interrupt you and tell you the same thing. So can we please, you'll have to go all over.
No, go with the next speaker. Let me try to see what can be done. So I don't want to disturb.
Deepak, yes. Deepak, can you share your thoughts on this WH family questions of digital marketing strategy?
Sure, Amit. Thank you. Sorry for the trouble you're having. Sure, we can get back once you fix that. Essentially, as we were talking about, pretty simple framework in the simplicity of it. I think the importance is the simplicity of it, right? It's a question of when you are targeting a message, when you are positioning a product or what have you, right? It is important to first of all determine what it is that you're doing. So the W's in terms of understanding the product, understanding the service, understanding what it is that you are actually trying to market to people. Number one, right? It's good, you need to be able to understand that. Number two is, okay, so who is your customer? Whom are you targeting this to, right? And what is the, and what is the right way? People use different channels in terms of how they consume information. Or you actually targeting the right people in the right channels in terms of being able to determine what that is all about. And and then the how comes in, right? In terms of how do you actually take all of this information, build the right context to it, address the right people that you want to actually target, and really get the message in a really succinct, a really summarized fashion, so that people don't have to waste a lot of time understanding what you're trying to tell them, right? Essentially, to me, a sustainable framework that is as simple as the WF framework provides is something that is very important as you think about from a marketing perspective, right? And the idea is to leverage that framework to be able to determine how, what, when, where you want to do things as you go about in the life cycle. In terms of just being able to sustain, I think you talked a little bit about this, Amit, and perhaps you can also expand a little bit on that, is the fact that sustainability is not just doing it one time, right? The important part is, as you explained, you have to be able to leverage what you design to the highs and lows of a campaign or a program or something new that comes up, or what have you. A good example is, let's say your demand suddenly increased on a particular product or a service offering. So you start getting hundreds of calls, thousands of calls. So what do? Can you go hire another 100 people to just be able to receive all those calls? You can't flip around on something like that very quickly. Those are things that sustainable framework should be able to do. Can you actually do that in a different way rather than trying to hire that many people to answer those calls, or handle any of the inbound inquiries, or what have you, right? So a sustainability framework is something that will last longer and is flexible enough to be able to manage the highs and lows of your campaigns and be able to provide that year on year, and then flexible enough to modify for the market needs. Market needs do change. 5G network suddenly becomes very popular. So how do you change your campaigns to be able to leverage the new products or services that come into the market, and is your system flexible enough to be able to adapt to that, right? So that's kind of what was in my mind when I think about sustainable framework.
I just want to add one thing here. Is my voice audible?
Yes, you're good now, Shivu.
Okay, so I just want to add one point to what he might. Thanks a lot for pitching in. So I think if you really want to look at sustainability around these areas, I would like to bucket it into three categories. Right? One is on the configuration part of it itself. So when we talk about configuration, we are talking about structuring the messaging. What kind of networking are we talking about, and really what kind of profit models are we talking about, because that defines the marketing messaging and framework. The second one is the offering itself. What kind of processes we're going to follow, what kind of product performance are we expected, and what would be the product systems we are talking about. And finally, everything boils down to customer experience. So when we talk about customer experience, we're talking about how do we really engage with the customer, what kind of brand projection are we trying to do, what are the different channels we are looking at, and what kind of service we want to offer. I think we can discuss a little bit more on what are the newer strategies which is applicable in these areas, which will make a huge difference for the next generation companies. So I just wanted to make that point.
So, Deepak, would you like to answer this one, or you would me to elaborate this question further?
Please go ahead and elaborate. We can always come
So,
back.
yeah, it started all with the mobiles and computers. And earlier they used to be just computers, right? Now they are connected computers. And it is same in the case of mobiles also. It used to be standalone mobiles with just only voice call and short message facilities. Now the mobiles are connected and you can transmit the content, rich content, to the millions and billions of mobile devices with the click of with a few clicks and with ready material, right? So a lot of evolutions have happened in the last, let's say, around 20-25 years. Since in India in particularly, around it started around if we talk about computers, it started around 90s, in the beginning of the 90s. If we talk about mobiles, it was around 98 or 97. And with the Mukesh Bhai coming into the picture with 4G, right? The connectivity equations changed dramatically around 2015-16 with the introduction of 3G and 4G, particularly 4G, right? So how do you see this? How can technology play a part in increasing the effectiveness of the efforts that was not there earlier with us?
John, so I think a lot has evolved, and and things keep actually changing, right? And if I were to say, what used to happen versus what is actually happening today, gone are the days of how we would attack in terms of what we would refer to as a spray and pray. You actually do an outbound, and you actually send out a bunch, whether it is in batches or what have you, and you spray everybody that you could actually get access to, and pray that some people actually click on it, some people open your email, some people read the material you say, what have you, right? So that has evolved significantly from there, as you talked about in terms of over the years. Now people want to look at things, the same things actually in different channels. If I am actually in a car and I'm driving, I'm spending some time, but I want to be able to look at something on my mobile. I'm in my office, I prefer to actually look at the same thing in my laptop. If I'm relaxing in some place, then I would probably want to look at it on my tablet or something like that, right? There are different channels, but everybody expects the same thing to be available at whatever time they want, right? So for many organizations, really trying to gain an edge over the competition, it can be the deciding factor as to who comes out on top, right? Customer expectations are all-time high, and that the patience is very low, if for that matter, right? Everybody wants the information, right away at their fingertips. So to meet those customer demands, every experience and every interaction a customer has with a brand or with a company has to be spot on and delivered to the exact moment of that need, right? So you typically have if you look at in terms of what is in the future, let's say I'll take your question in a way where I can predict what is in the future, let's say, right? I would want to make a couple of predictions. I would say 5 points I want to make in terms of predictions, right? One, data will be a significant value or at the center of our decision making for all marketing strategies, if you want. It has already become a norm to be able to use the data that you have to be able to make those decisions, and that will continue growing. Second, a customer engagement will be driven predominantly by artificial intelligence enabled decision making, right? Essentially, all of the outbound reach will be driven to strategically, adapt and focus based on AI, ML, based on predictive and adaptive analytics, based on natural language processing, what have you, right? Number three, I see, which maybe a little bit of a step further is about AI-driven voice and messaging. That I believe is going to change the marketing segment in itself and democratize the use of AI-driven voice and messaging, right, across the domains. Number four, a lot more of marketing personnel in our organizations will be more focused about marketing strategies rather than being executing, the marketing campaigns, which predominantly can be left to automated ways of doing things in terms of whether, how you execute, a campaign, right? Lastly, I would say all inbound, all inbound queries in a way will be automated more or less, whether that is across multi-channels, right? And whether those are chat bots, email bots, other kind of intelligent virtual assistants, those will actually leverage and process things that automatically, that does not necessarily need a human intervention, where our resources, valuable resources, can focus more on the strategies, if you will. Those are kind of, I could say, my predictions over the next, few years in the domain, really that are technology driven. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. At least these AI ML driven responses, automatic responses, either in the form of voice or text, is something we are already seeing in the present day scenario. That is already happening. If you look at some standard set of queries put up towards the renowned brands, right? They have these kind of arrangements in place in the present day scenario as well. I would like to go to Shivanand.
No, I think one more thing, which I'm sure Deepak also might be working on it, is the advent of immersed technologies, which is coming in, which is going to make a huge difference in the marketing, not just in the marketing, but I think the whole customer engagement space itself. Because the extension of AR, VR into metaverse today, I think it's going to be a game changer in the next 5 years. I think everybody is looking forward for the technology. I know many Indian startups which is working in that area, and very amazing engagement models they've come up with. So I think that's another thing which I would see as a huge difference in.
Good point, Shiv.
So that helps me. Means that is something I would like to ask you to please explain us with the better examples. Have you seen these transformations happening? I think he lost. He got disconnected.
No, of course, the transformations are happening.
So
We already have seen in multiple big companies, also in the startup space, where they have effectively started using AR, VR in not just reaching out to the customer, but also in the product promotions. This is becoming a new channel for marketing agencies, right? So there are many examples where we can see bigger companies also actually taking advantage of it.
Okay. But can you share us if you have a case study or example, if it will help our audience understand that how a particular company was doing X in the past and how they transformed to Y with the help of this AI. If you have any example.
Sure. If you had walked into the marketing booth earlier, right, in a conference, you would have actually seen a small booth which used to call it as experience center, and people would walk into this experience center and actually look at the products, talk to the experts, look and feel the product and then come out. And there is a good engagement which used to happen. But today, with the AR technologies, sitting at home, you're actually, if you have an Oculus or any of these devices, or in the booths also, you see that people have started wearing these glasses, and actually you can do much more than what you could have done in the live booths, because I can actually take you into my factory. For example, if I'm a car manufacturer, not only show you the end product, actually I can make you walk into my production lines and make you feel and get you connected to the product itself directly, right? If for example, if I have to show you the color choice, instead of showing you a palette of colors, in fact, Mahindra does this. Instead of showing you the palette of colors, they actually take you to the paint shop and you let to choose the colors, and you will see a service engineer actually paint the car in that color and show you the color, the car, right? So it is much more engaging, much more connected, and I think it has a bigger impact on the customer experience. So we have seen it, as I told you, this is not just in the smaller companies, we have seen it in the big companies also who have adopted this and implementing it very nicely.
Okay. Okay. Now see, there is one thing. Now there is another challenge. Is this kind of arrangement, I would say, for example, AI and ML, and even many other traditional ways also. Is it now it has become almost a challenge to implement the same kind of AI and ML model into different marketing channels, right? And there is quite a big challenge as well, because not each and every marketing platform is prepared to have this kind of demand accommodated. Like, for example, let's take an example of social media, right? In social media, you can communicate to your prospective target in a way that is different from the search media, or let's say your website also. On your website, you can provide a much richer experience because everything is in your control. That is something not there on the social media. They are controlled by their own policies and all those things. So how can you overcome this challenge? And means, how do you get your target audience into a funnel in which it is very easy for them to engage with you through different marketing channels, and then they blend into your AI, ML, or experience center arrangement?
Sure. So I think, see, the focus on the marketing strategy itself has to be more on the inbound side. So when we talk about technology, it has completely changed the way we look at how we implement some of these strategies. At the same time, the consumer is also changing, right? The consumer of our product 10 years back compared to today is completely different. So if you really look at an increasingly competitive and a complex mesh of world today, which is completely connected, collaboration, agility, transparency, speed at which you react is very, very important, right? And you need to have a relentless obsession with customer experience. Otherwise, you don't survive. Now, if you really look at the new era of marketing, and I personally feel our customers are our best marketing channels, right? Gone are the days where we looked at the funnel approach, right? When we look at the funnel approach, what I mean is you had the marketing feeds into the sales will connect with the customer. This was the funnel which was earlier. And I think today we need a huge transformation on this. And we one of the very famous transformation which some of the leading companies have done is actually they moved from funnel to flywheel. Now, what do you mean by flywheel? So in a funnel methodology, it is actually a customer is an afterthought, because you start with marketing, you look at the sales, and then reach out to the customer. But when you look at a flywheel, customer is at the center. Around the customer, you actually define the service, marketing, and sales. And that's a completely newer way of looking at this. And of course, many companies are doing it without the terminology as flywheel, but actually flywheel is what is working in most of these companies. If For the benefit of audience, if you want me to differentiate between the traditional funnel method and the flywheel method, see, in the funnel method, you are trying to engage, like how he said, right? It's a spray or pray kind of a model. You don't know whether you're going to, hit the right customer who's going to buy your product or service. The engagement is not continuous; it is whenever, right? And you're just anticipating the need. You don't know if the customer needs it or not. But in the flywheel, you're very adaptable. Like you rightly said, the channel itself, you need to be omni-channel. What works in LinkedIn will not work in Facebook post, for example. What works in Facebook will not work in Instagram. So you need to be very adaptable. You need to be available 24/7, either through a person or through bots. So that's one thing which needs to be done. And most importantly, you need to be very authentic in terms of your messaging, in terms of relationships. So you cannot just depend on machines to solve your problems. You need to be very authentic. That's where the human connection comes in the marketing strategy. So that's what I would want to summarize it for. So the summary is, how do we move effectively from a funnel method to a flywheel method? I think that's where the future marketing strategies would lie. Do you want to?
I was just going to add one thing to your point, Shiv. I think you made a great point in terms of leveraging the flywheel method. In fact, one of the things that we do at Pega, right, we actually have changed customer engagement to one-to-one customer engagement. It's not just broad customer engagement anymore, right? And the thought process of what you talked about, we don't forget customers. When you start your from when you start your reach, right, to do outbound, you actually use the data you have. You should know actually which customers I can reach out to, in what channel. that's what so for example, one-to-one customer engagement or our customer decision hub as a product, uses the entire, AI engine, AI ML engine to be able to determine which customers do I target to and how do I make that next best decision, right? And not like Shivu said, not everybody is using the same channel. So how do you go to the customer? You don't, wait for them to come to you. You go to the customer. You are customizing in terms of what you want to actually present to whom, where, right? And really make that happen. So customer is always at the center of that flywheel.
So we still have around 10, 12 minutes. Would you like to add anything into this? I mean, with case studies or examples? Or
Sure. I saw one question on the public bot. Let me try to answer the first question, and Deepak can pitch in for that. The question is, if the organization is using AI-driven query generation and chatbots, what rules should be followed to revert back with the customers in case of queries set by them? So first thing, I think underlying principle we need to understand is AI is not replacing everything, right? AI and machine learning is add on to what we already are doing. So it's very, very important that you don't start forming rules so complex that you end up with only machines talking to the person. Because usually there are a couple of engagement rules in terms of, for example, if the machine replies 2 or 3 queries, the 4th query usually is by a human, because otherwise you lose a customer. Sometimes the chatbots have evolved in the last couple of years. Definitely, it's much, much better than where they were last 2 years back. But the chatbot also has to learn. You need a team of people who will actually train the chatbots so that it engages with the customers effectively. So while you're forming rules of engagement with the customer through chatbots and personal connect, you also have to make sure that your chatbot is also matured. And most of the chatbot solution providers actually work with the companies to ensure that it is representing the company's ethos. Because you cannot have a generic chatbot talking to a customer. If you walk into a McDonald's today, if you walk into a Burger King today, if you walk into a State Bank of India today, if you walk into S Bank today, there is a very different customer experience the brand demands. And you need to make sure that the technology understands that. And of course, there is a company, a group of people in each of our companies who do that. So I just want to make sure that people understand that AI is not the end solution to customer engagement. It's just an add-on to what we were already doing.
Great point, Shiv. I think you're right. Customers really do not care about how a company's infrastructure works. What how do they have siloed channel deployment in terms of how they operate, what have you. They would like to see the things in the channel they like to use, with the content essentially being the same, right? When it comes to leveraging technology in the channels, unfortunately, one of the common traps that I've seen is that many organizations want to start their real-time journey with, let's say, email instead of implementing an inbound channel. Because they see massive potential in the ability just to be able to, scale, ability of that outbound program to stimulate growth for that matter. But putting outbound before inbound is like putting the cart before the horse. I think that's also what you were trying to make a point as well. So, trigger-based programs require a stronger source of real-time behavioral data, and to perform well, right? And that's only available when channels like web and mobile are already connected, to your point. And otherwise, they don't have the context they need to be able to do the right thing. So you might have all the technology, but they will not be doing the right thing, for that matter. So it's definitely not all about AI, ML and replacing what we do, but it's really about how do you leverage to do additional things, on top of what we do.
Now, I would like to answer this question in my way. Please don't get me wrong. Right. See, the question was, what rule should be followed to revert back with the customers in case of queries set by the customers, right? See, most of the chatbots have that facility inbuilt. They always, means whenever somebody tries to type something in the chat widget or chat form, right, they keep reading that message. And based on that typing, they continuously, almost in ongoing manner, they keep recommending the questions. Do you have these? For example, let's take a simple example. I want to know the status of my refund. If I'm typing that is something with the chatbot, then the chatbot reads only those two keywords, the main keyword, status and refund. Or let's say, let's take an example of this Mahindra. What are the color options available for, let's say, XUV 500, right? So color options, availability, and XUV 500. These 4 or 5 words are read by the chatbots, and they try to correlate the question, or they, in some cases I have seen, the chatbots also confirm, are you looking for this? Then they come back with the proper answer. Now, what does this help? What does this do actually? Let's imagine this was completely done by humans, right? And we used to have a battery of the people working with the, let's say, addressing or answering 1,000 queries a day. Now, to answer those 1,000 chats, you at least need 25 to 30 people, depending upon the length of the duration. The early set of questions are handled by the chatbots, and that reduces the workforce requirement of at least 30%. I have seen it happening in my own office. At least 30%. Now, when chatbots realize that they are not able to understand the query set by the customer, they change the channel from automatic or chatbot to the human chat. It happens automatically. Those solutions are there, capable enough to do this thing in its own way. And in that case, our human chat agents jump into the picture, and they try to read the query, and then they answer it. Now, when this happens, chatbot is also learning what was answered by the human. So if something similar happens again in the near future, they try to do it themselves in the near future. That is about chatbots. That is how they work. I believe I have tried to answer Diksha. Now the next question is, who would like to answer this? Where does the concept of brand ideology fit in sustainable marketing strategy? Brand ideology and sustainable marketing strategy to promote the business as a whole.
Amit, you are the domain expert, so you should go.
See, brand ideology itself is a sustainable, right? The brand value, or the impact of identity of something is something doesn't get eroded in a short time. When I talk of Maruti, I know they produce really good quality vehicles. Or let's say I'm talking about the Raymonds. Raymonds are there in the business for a long time. They produce fine quality fabric, right? So the brand ideology itself is sustainable. It just doesn't go away overnight. It is. So when you try to make that ideology kind of things, or when you try to portray let's take an example of toothpaste. I'm using word intentionally, this word toothpaste. It used to be Colgate earlier. Nowadays, people have become aware. They have become too educated to a great extent that there are other toothpastes available in the market than the Colgate. But Colgate is still there. So brand ideology itself is sustainable. You don't have to worry much about it. That itself drives the good amount of business. Only thing is, your product should be available to them whenever they are looking forward to those kind of products. If that is not available, or if those are not approachable, accessible, then the very purpose of creating that brand ideology doesn't serve.
Yeah, good point. That ideology itself brings the recall that you need to the most part. But while that is true, building an ideology is not an easy thing. It takes years to build that, right? You know, it isn't about the years also. It is also about being consistent throughout the period. Agree.
Being consistent, being accommodating as well. It doesn't have to be just consistency also. If there are changes in the ecosystem of the business, if there are changes in the sector of the business, let's say about this mobile network, right? They started with some 2G, and voice call was the predominant requirement of the business. Right. Voice or SMS. Now they are not at all collecting the revenue from the voice calls. They are selling data plans only.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Right?
Actually, yeah.
So it doesn't have to be just consistent. They have to be accommodating as well.
Correct. And I think there's one question which I want to take here, which talks about organization mindset and corporate philosophy and approach to business is very important in the theory of marketing framework. How important in this context? I want to give you one example. which is a very good example, at least what I have seen in a couple of years. Indian Army, people were hesitant to join Indian Army earlier, right? I mean, they took it as a problem statement. And 5 years back or 7 years back, you might have seen Indian Army just morphed into a completely different organization and started advertising and attracting young talent to join Indian Army. And the same thing we are seeing in DRDO right now in the space projects and other things. So yes, corporate mindset and philosophy is very, very important. But at the same time, you cannot be working in silos. Organizations, whether it's government organizations or a private organization, have to revisit their philosophies also once in a while to make sure they are up to date and in line with what's happening in the market. You cannot be sitting in a silo and say, this is how I work, this is my philosophy, this is my mindset, I'm not going to change. And I think growth mindset is what every organization needs to have. And we have like thousands of examples where companies have failed when they have stuck to their own mindset and philosophy and said, this is how I'm going to work. I think Indian Army is a classic example. In the couple of years, last few years, we've done a wonderful job. And now DRDO is doing the same thing. I mean, if you go and look at it, semiconductor initiative, which was announced 2 weeks back, has already reached out to the public, and they're hiring CEO, CTO, and CFO for a government-led initiative where they're actually getting the best talent from the industry to join the semiconductor market. So I think organization mindset is very, very important because that holds the company together. At the same time, when you want to do new things, when you want to reach out to newer set of customers, I think growth mindset is more important.
Now, I would like to give one more example of failure about this thing. Right? He mentioned about Indian Army and DRDO. Let's take an example of Ford Motors. If you look at all the automobile companies of the Western world, right, where there is a huge amount of money available to buy automobiles, when there is decent amount of money available to buy cars and automobiles, they try to spend more. And when they try to spend more, they expect performance, they expect safety, they expect, right? It is completely opposite to the Eastern world. Eastern world believes in efficiency. They would like to have lighter cars. They can compromise on safety aspect as well. So this was the mindset of the Western countries to produce highly performing cars, strong cars, heavy vehicles. There is something that mindset got into, I would say, their marketing strategy as well, and they failed. Their marketing failed. They failed to convince that these cars are really safe. See, they just didn't fail in marketing. They just failed in understanding the trend in the demands also as well, trending demands. So that is the reason Ford failed here in India, and even General Motors. They both have similar mindset. They come from the almost similar DNA. Right? So we have to be very careful in the way we set up our organization as well. We can't be looking forward to, or we can't be aiming only the way we would like to do business. We have to have that accommodating nature of the demand.
I think one of you should take this question. The question is, how has the concept of personalized marketing become important? How technology can be the way to reach out to individual customer to meet his or her personalized requirement?
I don't know if we're also out of time, I think.
Should I answer this?
Please go ahead, because we're also out of time where we should wrap up as well. I think Bharti is as well.
Bharti is here with us. Bharti, are you here to close the session or wrap up the session?
No, sir. That's not my expertise. I'll let you do that. We can just quickly take the last question and then we can end the session.
Okay, so I'm not seeing that question. I believe the personalized, right? See, most of as far as the digital marketing channels are concerned, they are tracking the personnel's behavior, personnel's response system, personnel's the thought process, and based on those, it is a matter of data actually. The huge data. Each and every marketing channel stores the tendency of a user that they are serving to. And that same tendency is utilized to define the responsiveness or the characteristic of that personnel. And those tendencies are available for you to select in your marketing preferences. Right? For example, if somebody, now let me give you a very simple example. Affinity audience and in-market audience, these two are, if you are a car enthusiast, since we have been discussing about automobiles only, if you are a car enthusiast, if you keep browsing the websites and the content, if you keep consuming the content that is about cars only in almost ongoing manner in a with almost equal consistency throughout the years, then you are part of affinity audience of the automobile sector. But if you do once in a while, let's say just today morning, I have been informed by my wife that she wants to have an automatic small car, then I may start searching for that. And if I do, the marketing channels understand this, that they try to take this behavior and they put me in the in-market audience. This guy is in the market in the search of small automatic car, right? So based on that, if I'm in that in-marketing audience, and if the prospective companies are selecting those targeted, then I can be targeted by those companies. For example, let's take an example of Maruti or Volkswagen or even Tata's, who are selling the small automatic cars. So this definitely helps. You have to be having the knowledge of the different options available with the different marketing channels, and that is how you can serve the personalized content to those consumers.
I agree. I think personalization really comes from data. So as we were talking about the entire AI ML advent and how the center of that actually all is data science, right? It's about being able to learn from the data you have, so you actually have the opportunity to personalize your reach out to people in terms of what you present to whom, right? So we say you only have one chance to get it right. And you better get it right before your competition gets it right. And if you do it right, you might actually have a customer for life versus not having one. So I just wanted to say that.
I have a very classical example that happened with me. I'm just trying to be short. One of my friend who is producing the Type C press machines in Rajkot, he approached me that I want to run Google Ads on this and this, since he presumed that I'm Google expert. So I had set up the campaigns for him, and almost for about 3 to 4 months, we didn't see any inquiry coming into the business. Then we realized that this Type C machine press buyers are very less in India. And I asked him how many prospective clients might be there for you in India. He said around 5,000 factories use this kind of machinery, not more than them. Then we realized why did we fail? So we turned back to a different approach. I said, collect the data. Try to write personalized email to those target. Let's write only 5 email, 1-to-1 email, only 5 emails a day to those you're targeting customers or prospective clients segment. And about 3 months after following this process, for about 3 months, he stopped doing it, and we could get in touch with each other in about 6 months' time, and asked him, what is the status of that process that you are following? He said, I stopped doing that after 3 months. And I asked him why. He said, within 3 months, I had started getting enough responses on my emails that I couldn't get time to write those new remaining segments. So it was enough for me to generate enough of business to remain or to utilize my plant in 100% capacity. So you have to understand who is your target audience and where they are available effectively to engage with. So that is the case.
True. Yeah.
Awesome. Perhaps we should wrap up.
Sure. So I believe it has been a good session where our audience could find enough of insights to work on or to implement for themselves. And I would like to thank Mr. Shivananda Koteswar to be part of this session, and Deepak and Visweswaraiah as well. And looking forward to handing it over to you, Bharti.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you, everyone.